أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Chapter 13. Malaise. Keeping you misinformed is their job. Mainstream media aims to be as relevant as possible to as many people as possible for the simple reason that more viewers mean more money. The not so unintentional consequence of this is a kind of nihilism about the truth. The truth is not something CNN, Fox News, or the New York Times editorial board are really interested in, frankly. Outlets such as these have relegated themselves to merely fostering debate and covering all sides of an issue, but not all issues have multiple sides and not all matters require endless debate. Some issues are easily resolved or can be satisfactorily addressed through some quality research and analysis. But outside a handful of topics of consensus, the mainstream media tries its best to avoid resolution. It does this by amplifying the most misinformed, biased, and irrationally opinionated voices. Consider the gun debate that crops up every 5 to 6 weeks in the news cycles in the US. Despite all appearances, there are clear answers to some of the fundamental questions everyone should have about gun violence, homicide rates, mass shootings, etc. And even if we don't have answers now, at least there are research methodologies that can be pursued in a rational, scientific way to address those questions. Anyone who is sincerely interested in the truth of the matter would want to follow those methodologies in seeking robust answers. With all its resources, the mainstream media should be responsible for conducting such research and/or enabling those who can do so, and then disseminate the results far and wide. And if the results are still ambiguous, then at least the pursuant conversation would be an informed one. But that is not what the media is interested in, because they are not interested in the truth. They are interested in viewership, readership, and that means catering to the lowest common denominator. And given the abysmal state of literacy and education in the US, especially when it comes to logical analysis, science, etc., that common denominator is quite low indeed. Consuming content and its effect on the heart. Most media content is determined on the basis of what will have the highest consumption. Content producers determine what people are most likely to consume and then generate their content on that basis. This is an inversion of knowledge, art, and creativity, which is why it's called content, not speech, writing, discourse, aesthetics, artistic expression, and so on. Rather than be driven by a pursuit of truth, beauty, and meaning, content is literally nothing but the hollow pursuit of the dollar. Western philosophers, for example Marxists, noted this commodification of the arts earlier in the 20th century. But even they could not imagine the depths to which present media have sunk. What is so subversive about media content today is that it often presents itself as profound, as meaningful, as sentimental, and heartfelt. The reality, though, is that much of that content is carefully engineered to artificially induce those emotions in the consumer, because that reaction correlates with more consumption, more money, more profit. A cold, soulless machine that wraps itself in a canvas of love, truth, and even injustice. This, of course, is hypocrisy, and the danger for us living in an ethos of hypocrisy is that we will unknowingly take on that modality in our own expression, prioritizing form over substance, aiming to elicit a response instead of aiming for haqq, pursuing approval from creation instead of the creator, our hearts in turn hardening as we become accustomed to the fake stuff instead of reality, wallowing in an ersatz dunya of pseudo-significance. The single eye of modern politics. If you have ever wondered how the prophesied Dajjal, i.e. the Antichrist, could have such a large following among people, including Muslims, despite his physical disfigurement, his tyranny, and the word kafir literally spelled out on his face, look no further than modern politics. I've always wondered about this. Why would anyone follow such a clearly evil being? The answer is all around us. We see shades of the same thing happening today in the East and West. You have politicians that openly commit all manner of atrocity against the human race. They massacre, drone strike, steal, corrupt, poison, all in full view of public scrutiny, but no one seems to care. I mean, does a person really care about the murder and oppression wrought by the hands of someone like President Obama if him making a sappy, pandering speech is enough to elicit drooling praise and slack-jawed devotion from that person? So many crimes are whitewashed in the minds of people. Bombing, invading, occupying. These are nothing more than geopolitics or hawkish foreign policy. Killing innocent people is nothing more than collateral damage. Militarizing a police force that then terrorizes society and is responsible for an endless stream of brutality and death is nothing more than being tough on crime and serious about security. Is creative wording all it takes for you people to fall in line? Just some carefully chosen terms and suddenly you can't see the butcher's knife mutilating the corpse? Is well-spun terminology like a magic elixir that your mind cannot resist? If so, just try to hold on to one thing. God is not one-eyed. How capitalism destroys contentment. Contentment, qana'a, is a lost virtue in our times. Why? We are constantly being conditioned by the modern capitalistic world to see ourselves as masters of our own destiny. All that separates us from success and riches is our own effort and passion and drive, so we are told. The concepts of Allah's decree and appointment and apportionment are nowhere in the picture, so people can never be content because they rely on themselves despite the reality that we are all impotent and it is Allah who decides. These are matters of the heart. If you find yourself unsatisfied in life and restless, reflect on contentment and your conviction in the power and the control of your Creator. The corporate virus. If you're not growing, you're dying. This is the corporate assumption that underlies the capitalist economy of our times. The health of a business requires that revenue and profit increase every year. In other contexts, it seems as most reasonable to achieve equilibrium and sustainability. That's certainly what so much of environment is supposed to be about. A healthy planet is where people only consume what they need and do so in a way that is sustainable long term and doesn't take away from the needs of others. This is not possible if you believe that lack of growth means death. The notion that continuous growth is possible itself assumes infinite resources. For example, at some point, every person in the world could have an Apple iPhone. After that, there's no more conceivable growth, right? Wrong. Every person on that planet could also own a MacBook. And after that, they could all own iPads. And after that, maybe Apple can expand into other verticals like the clothing industry, etc. In other words, as long as a brand is not dominating every aspect of every person's consumption, there is always room for growth. Until the brand consumes the consumer, there is room for improvement, like a virus. The Prophet ﷺ aptly described this. If the son of Adam were to own a valley full of gold, he would desire to have two. Nothing can fill his mouth except the earth of the grave. Allah turns with mercy to him who turns to him in repentance. End quote. Positive psychology, self-help, the signs of happiness. I recently watched a documentary called Happy about what brings people happiness and joy. The documentary interviewed many psychologists, neurologists, and other happiness experts, as well as surveyed many different cultures around the world, but notably did not include a single Muslim nation or culture. The 1.5 hour long documentary had just 10 seconds on the fact that religion brings some people happiness, and it included 30 seconds on how religion actually is a source of much pain and suffering in the world. Ultimately, the documentary concludes that happiness is about being charitable, serving others, being grateful, being content, pursuing meaning, connecting with family and neighbors, not overvaluing money and material possessions, meditating and spending time on quiet reflections and spending time in nature. I thought to myself, all these things have analogues in Islam and organized religion generally. Do people not make that connection? If happiness is the goal, and these are the factors that are conducive to happiness, then organized religion, and especially Islam, which harmonizes these factors and brings them to their perfect expression in the Sunnah, is the clear answer for how people should lead their lives. The only cost for that happiness is believing in Allah, and so even hedonistic modernity will sacrifice happiness to avoid submitting to a higher authority, preferring instead to define happiness in terms of an assortment of hollow truisms that may capture the form but miss the essence and source of true happiness. The reality of barakah. Barakah is a reality. Don't let the materialistic assumptions of the modern world infect your thinking and how you live your day-to-day life. Don't become cynical or complacent about this important aspect of the unseen. The blessings that Allah bestows on humanity are real and have tangible impact. And yes, sometimes that impact is not explainable in terms of the materialistic parameters of thought many of us have consigned ourselves to. Don't just acknowledge barakah in a theoretical sense. Know it and see the world around you in light of it. As a Muslim, barakah needs to be part of how you see the world. that will furnish you with spiritual benefits because you will be seeking that barakah and you will gain greater consciousness of your Lord. Your iman will also experience periodic boosts as you start to recognize the place of barakah, or the lack thereof, in your life. You will notice that remembering Allah, dhikr, and good deeds bring you barakah and the opposite take it away. This will immensely improve your state of mind and heart. This is because you will see and experience the connections between the world and will and power of Allah. These are some of the many ayah all around us. Quote, "We will show them our signs in the horizons and within themselves until it becomes clear to them that it is the truth. But is it not sufficient concerning your Lord that He is over all things a witness?" End quote. Fusilat, Quran chapter 41, verse 53. There will also be material benefits in terms of your wealth, time, efficacy, efficiency, etc. Things will start working out, so to speak. You will also benefit intellectually because you will gain more of an understanding of how the world really works. Again, instead of a theoretical knowledge, you will have experiential knowledge because you will have experienced these things and seen them for yourselves. So seek barakah in all the many things that Allah and His Messenger ﷺ have specified. Make it a part of your daily life and make it the lens by which you understand your life. And may Allah bless us all. Ramzan versus Ramadan. Nationalism is a funny thing. It can be the source of bonding and camaraderie as well as the cause of animosity, chest puffing and downright silliness. Just consider all the online debate about the article, "Why are Indian Muslims using the Arabic word Ramadan instead of the traditional Ramzan?" written by Shoaib Daniel. The article details how historically the Arabic word for Islam's sacred month Ramadan came to be pronounced Ramzan in the subcontinent, and how recently many South Asian Muslims are reverting to the Ramadan pronunciation due to, as the author puts it, the effect of a Saudi-influenced brand of Islam and cultural insecurity on the part of said South Asians. Apparently, this is a debate that has been cropping up annually in South Asian communities on Ramadan, and there are a lot of competing sociopolitical tensions that underlie and color the conversation. As far as I am concerned, however, much of it is little more than nationalism and thinly veiled anti-Arabism masquerading as serious historical and linguistic analysis. The urge to purge. Calls for abandoning Arabicized language in the preference for a more authentic, traditional, or pure use of language is hardly new and certainly not limited to South Asia. Historically, many nationalist movements in the Middle East have called for dropping vocabulary, pronunciation, and script associated with Arabs and Arabic. In 20th century Turkey, for example, part of Ataturk's compulsory modernization program was replacing the Perso-Arabic script of Ottoman Turkish with a new Latin-based Turkish alphabet that was meant to be truer to the modern secular Turkish identity. In Iran also, government programs under the rule of Muhammad Reza Shah attempted to purify the Persian language by excising any and all Arabic vocabulary and replacing it with Farsi equivalents, even if that meant inventing a Farsi word from scratch. Historically, these calls for purging Arabic almost always coincided with efforts to secularize society and attenuate the influence of Islam in people's lives. Beyond the Middle East and Arabic in particular, attempting to reform the way people use language is often little more than a way to bolster, entrench, or cultivate nationalistic identities. Mundane linguistic details become the battlefield for ideological tug-of-war. What often features in these debates, however, is partisan historiography and what Professor Reza Zia Ebrahimi of King's College in London calls dislocative nationalism. Professor Zia Ebrahimi's research is concerned with how Persian nationalists in the 19th and 20th centuries invented an Aryan national identity that they then back-projected thousands of years to claim that Iran, as a cohesive nation with its own distinct identity, religion, and language, existed in ancient times and persisted throughout history despite the corrupting influence of invading forces and cross-cultural mixing. Nationalist reformers in modern times then attempted to purify what they anachronistically believed to be that essence of Aryanness by decontaminating cultural markers of anything believed to be foreign and non-Aryan. For example, the Arabic language and even Islam as a whole. What these nationalists fail to appreciate, however, is that the concept of a nation is a modern construction, strictly speaking, just a figment of our collective imagination, and that the history of any given geographic region is a rich tapestry of interweaving cultures, languages, and traditions. Only a highly selective and hence inventive reading of history could ignore all that diversity in partitioning off a specific nationalistic or racial essence. This kind of nationalistic essentialism is, of course, not unlike what renowned scholar Edward Said identified and bemoaned as being operative in Orientalism and Western colonialism generally. Truth be told, this kind of caricaturing and mythologizing of history in service of contemporary nationalistic identity politics is ubiquitous. Whether it is modern Egyptians feeling a sense of connection to and national pride for the ancient pyramids, or modern Americans celebrating Thanksgiving as a commemoration of a peaceful partnership between the Pilgrims and Native Americans. What does all this have to do with Ramzan? We can see the selective or romanticized reading of history in Daniel's Ramadan versus Ramzan article. For example, the author repeatedly uses the term traditional to characterize the Ramzan pronunciation. The question to ask is, what makes Ramzan so traditional? Given that the subcontinent is home to hundreds of distinct languages and dialects, each with its own storied history, why insist on this one particular pronunciation? As Mahtab Alam noted in his post on this issue last year, not all Indians, let alone South Asians, claim Urdu Hindi as their mother tongue. Besides Ramzan, many South Asians have Ramajan, Ramjan, Rumjan, Ramazan, and so on. And he succinctly puts it, quote, insistence on one variation is as hegemonic as the other one, end quote. Further selectivity can be seen in how Daniel describes the historical influence of Persian, Farsi on the Indian native language, as opposed to the purported influence of Saudi Arabia today. The author does not see anything problematic or objectionable about the adoption of Persian language and culture in the evolution of the subcontinent over the course of centuries. But when it comes to the contemporary adoption of Arabicized speech patterns, that is somehow indicative of Saudi meddling and cultural insecurity on the part of Indian Muslims. So why the inconsistency? If it is a legitimate, natural, organic process for language to shift over time in the subcontinent due to Persian influence historically, why is it suddenly illegitimate, unnatural, objectionable when that language continues to shift in present times due to an Arab or American or English, etc. influence today? In other words, why does Daniel take a laissez-faire attitude when it comes to language transformations historically, but when it comes to modern transformations, suddenly tradition is so important and we have to preserve the pronunciations of old? What is so special, culturally iconic, and indispensable about this one particular Persian variant, Ramzan? All that Daniel has to offer in response to this is that Ramzan is traditional because that is how most Muslim Indians have been pronouncing it for a few hundred years. Of course, he does not cite any statistics or census results to substantiate this, but lack of verification aside, if we go back in time, at one point that Ramzan pronunciation itself was brand new and unprecedented in the subcontinent, just like Ramadan is supposedly brand new and unprecedented today. Maybe in a few hundred years, Ramadan too will be considered the traditional and culturally correct pronunciation. Only Khuda knows. Persian Confidential. To step back and comment on this entire debate, I just want to say that ultimately it does not matter how one pronounces Ramadan, or if a Muslim says namaz instead of salat. From my own life experience and observing the cross-cultural Muslim communities in the West and abroad, I found that these cultural debates are often nothing more than tribalism, asabiya, rearing its ugly head. In the interest of full disclosure, I am Persian American and grew up saying Ramazan, namaz, ruze, sahari, khuda, etc. I still use these words when speaking to my Iranian family member and do feel a warm connection to my Persian heritage. At the same time, I have no issue using the Arabic equivalents when speaking to others. For example, my Egyptian wife or my half-Persian, half-Egyptian sons who speak both Farsi and Arabic, mashallah. And coincidentally, in Persian, my first name Daniel is pronounced Daniel. Hopefully my pronunciation of my own name, Daniel, instead of Daniel, is not cultural insecurity on my part. As far as orthoepy is concerned, correct pronunciation is religiously insignificant when it comes to obligatory prayers as well as the study of Islamic sciences. For example, transmissions of the hadith. Beyond this, as Muslims, we should also not lose sight of the fact that Arabic is a special language for a number of reasons, chief among them that it is the language Allah chose for the Quran, His final revelation to mankind. Also, it is the mother tongue of the beloved Messenger of God Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Given these two facts alone, how can any Muslim not feel a deep, abiding love for Lisan al-Arab? As an American and a Persian, I personally feel no contradiction in or threat to my sense of identity by acknowledging this love. And when we look at the history, literature, and scholarship of non-Arab Muslims the world over, we also see a reverence for Arabic. Of course, it should go without saying that one's appreciation of Arabic has no bearing on one's opinion of the Saudi government or any other state institution. And furthermore, this love of classical formal Arabic, i.e. Fusha, does not give modern Arabs the right to look down on non-Arab Muslims as somehow less authentically Muslims for any reason. Least of which the fact that non-Arab Muslims use the word Ramzan, Sehri, etc. in lieu of the formal Arabic counterparts. Keep in mind that the first and arguably most influential book of Arabic grammar ever written was completed in the 2nd century of the Hijri calendar by the Persian Muslim scholar Sibawayh, who was a non-native speaker of the language to boot. Whether we like it or not, if we go far back enough in time, all of our personal family and cultural histories are inevitably an amalgamation of a multitude of cross-cultural influences, regardless of the modern national identities we may currently associate with. In that wider sense, vociferously insisting on a nationality and imbuing so much significance on a singular national identity and language just seems historically illiterate, chauvinistic, and well, silly. Sadaqallahul Azim.